Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
You are listening to Women's Running Stories, the podcast where exceptional women runners share inspirational stories about their running experiences.
Well, when I was young, ignorance was definitely bliss. In sixth grade, I ran a 5:09 mile. I was running these road races and running times where I could have gone and won Texas relays as a middle schooler. But at the time, I was like, oh yeah, this is just what I do. So it wasn't anything new. And I always found it exciting when I was young. We would go to Texas relays. They had NCAA regionals one year in Austin. And so we would go watch these things. And I always just loved a good race. And I loved just a really good kick and a good tactical race. And so I think that, kind of tapping into that right now in a time where times are so important and pacers and wave lights and all these things that people are so focused on, kind of reminding myself that I've always loved just a really good race has been helpful. Hi, my name is Madie Boreman. I grew up in Austin, Texas, went to school at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and I'm a professional steeplechaser for Oiselle, currently training in Flagstaff, Arizona.
Yes, this episode features Madie Boreman, a professional steeplechaser who races for Oiselle, and this is her very first podcast appearance. And indeed, Madie discovered her running talent at an early age, and she has always loved a good race. And that love and that talent continue to this day, fueling her success as she develops in her professional career. And that's where this episode will focus, how Madie Boreman made the transition from collegiate racing to becoming a professional track racer. Madie launched into her professional career just last year in 2023, and she is an exciting racer to watch. Madie's event of choice is the 3,000-meter steeplechase, and she will be in the hunt to make the U.S. Olympic team for the 2024 Olympics in Paris, happening later this summer. Madie's road to this point has been full of big successes as well as big challenges, and she is going to get into it all. But before you hear more from Madie, I want to welcome you to Women's Running Stories. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I am the host and producer of this podcast, and welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Now on to Madie's story. So yes, Madie is currently focused on the big goal of the year, and that is making the Olympic team. To do that, she'll need to place in the top 3 at the upcoming U.S. Olympic trials, which are happening June 21st through the 30th. A few things to know here before we dive in. Madie did attend the University of Colorado at Boulder, which is one of the top collegiate or NCAA teams in the country. In her story, she talks about staying on as an employee at the university after graduation, working under Coach Prime, and that is Deion Sanders. He's head football coach at CU Boulder, and his nickname is Primetime, so he's called Coach Prime. And yes, after Madie's time in Boulder, she made the move to where she lives now, in Flagstaff, Arizona. One little side note I wanted to mention here about the track and field program at CU Boulder. Members of the coaching team and staff did come under scrutiny last year for some of the practices around how they work with athletes, especially women athletes. And I will link to a terrific article by Cindy Kuzma, written for Runner's World, that sheds more light on that situation. All right, back to Madie. In her story, you're going to hear her mention the Drake Relays and the LA Grand Prix. These are big meets on the U.S. track and field calendar. She also mentions USAs and NCAAs, and she is talking about national championship events. The NCAAs are for collegiate athletes, and the USAs, or the USA National Championships, are for any and all of the country's top competitors. Also, she talks about running the standard, or the Olympic standard. And what she's referring to here is a time standard. Specifically, the Olympic standard is what time racers need to have run in order to compete at the Olympics. For the women's steeplechase, the 2024 Olympic standard is 9 minutes and 23 seconds. And suffice to say, meeting the Olympic standard, it is a really big deal. People take note of the athletes who can run this fast. It is a signal that you are one of the top contenders. Madie also talks about not being signed or not having a contract, and that just means she was racing unsponsored. In other words, it means being totally self-supported as an athlete. One last item here that Madie mentions is making a team, and what she's referring to is making a U.S. team. In particular, this year it's about making the Olympic team, but in other years it may be making a world championship team or some other traveling team going to a big event representing the United States. There's also something I wanted to give a little context to around this transition from collegiate racing to becoming a professional track and field runner. In very broad strokes, collegiate racers who are part of a well-supported program like the one at CU Boulder are provided with the tools they need to succeed. They're provided with equipment, coaching, facilities, uniforms, travel budgets. The list goes on. In addition, their training and racing and travel is all very structured and arranged for them. When runners turn pro, they're on their own. They must find all of their own support, facilities, uniforms, and all the rest of it. And they set their own racing schedule. On top of all that, they're up against a whole new level of competition. Turning pro is a very big leap. All right, so let's get to it. Let's hear Madie Boreman's story about launching into life as a pro. And her story begins with a glance back at her collegiate racing career, including the advice she received from her CU Boulder track and field coaches after graduation as she was looking to turn pro. Here to tell her story is Madie Boreman.
So, my freshman year of college, I actually got second at NCAAs. I set the American junior record in the steeple, and I did like all of these exciting things. And then I was like immediately hit with injuries. And so I think that kind of forced me to remold the future I had planned in my head. And I had like this really linear idea of how things would go. And the trajectory was clearly different than that. So in college, I was always a realist, and I was one of the people that strongly, discouraged others from kind of banking on being a professional athlete. And I was like, you got to plan for something outside of that. But then leaving college, I felt like I had a lot of untapped potential. Like I could just tell in my training that I wasn't doing all that I could do. And I could tell in racing, like I was still PRing. And I just really had this kind of gut feeling that there was more out for me in the sport. And my goal has always been to just get to my potential and see kind of what that is. So yeah, coming out of college, I knew that I was not there at all. And I really just wanted to put myself in a situation and give myself the opportunity to kind of explore that. And so I left college and had a conversation with my coaches, who actually encouraged me not to continue running. And yeah, I feel like I went into the conversation really excited and kind of just wanting some validation, because at the end of the day, like, they were my coaches, and those are the people that athletes constantly are seeking validation from. So I wanted that, and I wanted them to be like, yes, I agree, like, you can do this. So yeah, that was honestly really tough. Coming out of that, I like immediately talked to my agent. I was really upset. And he told me, don't listen to them. Like, they're crazy. Yeah. So in a nutshell, it was like, I had that conversation, felt really discouraged for about 20 minutes. And then immediately my support system was like, that's insane, and we're not going to listen to them. So yeah, it was an interesting, my feelings were definitely back and forth.
Madie's feelings about turning pro went back and forth, but she knew what she wanted, and that was to become a professional runner. And the lack of support from her CU Boulder coaches, it was something she'd already had some practice dealing with.
But yeah, I mean, the conversation I had with my coaches at the time was discouraging, but it wasn't anything new. I was kind of used to not getting a lot of support. I was used to being told, you can't do X, Y, and Z, and kind of working against that and using that as a motivator. So on paper, sure, I'm sure it sounds discouraging, but for me, it was like, okay, it's just another hurdle to get over. I've always been a very self-motivated and almost stubborn person. So them telling me you can't do it almost was like, okay, I think I can, and I'm going to show you that. So yeah. So yeah, leaving college and kind of going against what I had always told myself and going against what the people who I'm supposed to trust the most told me to do was very difficult. But I just had this feeling that, and it sounds so cliche, but I really did have like a gut feeling that there was more for me out there. I don't know, it's interesting because I feel like some people don't believe in that, but I've always thought I'm super intuitive. And so, I mean, even outside of running, I tend to just lean into whatever that's telling me. And then, yeah, I mean, it's typically right. So it hasn't failed me yet. Yeah.
So on the flip side of the disappointing vote of no confidence from the CU Boulder coaches, Madie had her strong intuition, and she'd built up support outside of the collegiate system. Of particular note was her agent, Isaya Okwiya.
Yeah, so I met my agent at like USA's in 2022, and we sat down and talked about what I was looking for, and I wanted to be at altitude. I had not always, I mean, I grew up in Texas, but I mean, all of college, I had been at altitude, and I thought that I always responded well to that, so I wanted to be there. I really wanted to work with a coach who was very different from my college coaches. I wanted a very supportive coach. I wanted somebody who really could just see in me what I couldn't quite see. So, yeah, he put me in touch with my coach now, Julie Benson. And I mean, off of our first conversation, I really felt like things clicked. We had just chatted on the phone. We didn't even meet in person. And it's really funny because Julie has this like aura and this like, I don't know how to describe it. She has like this energy about her. And like even at a track meet, and it's like I have friends that meet her and they're like, oh my God, she's like a woman. Like she's incredible. And I'm like, I know. And I could sense that even just through the phone. And so, yeah, that first conversation was just like, it was like a really welcomed and exciting change from conversations I had had with other coaches. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know really how to describe it besides like things just clicked. And she kind of repeated some of the things of like, I think you can do this, this, and this. And I really do see that. And it was kind of things that I had also seen in myself. So to hear somebody who didn't even know me, but had just seen me compete and was like, oh, this person can do this. I really I don't know, I just felt a lot of support from somebody that had no reason at the time to give it to me. So yeah. Yeah, so like in college, that was kind of lacking, the support was, and I felt like it really forced me to become independent and self-sufficient, which are two things I really do love about myself now, but it does get to be very taxing. And so it's been an interesting shift in the last 2 years, and I was speaking to Julie about it, and I was speaking to my sports psych about it, where I just feel like my body is overall just like adjusting to this change, like just feeling more relaxed, feeling more kind of at ease with everything, which I wasn't feeling for like 5-6 years in college. So yeah, I mean, it's been an adjustment mentally and like literally physically. So yeah, it is really interesting whenever you like start to kind of dive into it a little bit and like the impact that can have on you. But yeah, I think that that's a big reason why my training's going so well now, and I'm doing things that I wasn't doing before, is because there's just a lot of outside support that I'm getting that I didn't know that I would benefit from so much. So my first year running pro was interesting because I was somebody, I wasn't signed immediately out of college. I did honestly most of the year last year without a contract, and I was working, and so that was an interesting shift. But I was working with the athletics department under Coach Prime with the football team, so I didn't have to adjust to being in a new place or using new facilities. I was still using the indoor track and using the weight room and running on the same places I always had. So that was an easier transition. But I was doing a lot of the year unsigned and without a contract. And so it was really weighing on me. And I felt like every single race I had to kind of knock out of the park, and I really had to earn that contract. So that was tough for the first kind of bit of the year.
It was tough, and especially at Madie's first big meets, which included the Drake Relays at the end of April.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, last year I'd like to think I'm typically pretty like level-headed, but last year I was like a complete wreck before a few of those races. And Julie and my agent were like, just perform how you perform and everything will be fine. But yeah, I have never really been somebody to get super freaked out or super nervous. And the race that like stands out the most was my first steeple, which was at Drake. And I was like, my head was like spinning all day. The race was at like 7 p.m. And as soon as I woke up, like I immediately felt sick. And I just was driving myself crazy. And I've never been that way. And it was really out of my norm. So yeah, that was like another thing with last year, where it was just like a lot of things not really myself and just kind of adjusting to it. Yeah, I've always been a person where as soon as it gets into like race time, which I count as like obviously the race, the warm up, and then like the hour before where you're kind of getting ready to go at the hotel, as soon as it gets there, I like put on a facade and I kind of turn into a different, I don't know, I feel like everybody puts on a mask a little bit and you have to pretend to be a different person. So as soon as it gets to that time, I'm like ready to go. Yeah, as soon as I get really excited to get ready to go and then get to the track and kind of feel the energy at the track, and then obviously get on the line and get ready to get racing. So I look forward to that every race day. So once it got to that time, I was fine. But it was just like this day where I was just waiting for time to pass that, yeah, I was driving myself crazy. And I remember calling my coach, Julie, and I was like freaking out. And she was like, oh my God, this is insane. Like, this is not you. Just like calm down. It'll be fine. But I was really freaking out because I was like, oh my God, if I like run bad, then all the people who told me I couldn't do it are going to be right. And like, I'm never going to get signed. And I'm going to have to like quit running today if I run bad. And I had all these like catastrophic thoughts. But as soon as it gets into like getting ready to go, getting to the track, warming up on the start line, like I've always been very good at kind of managing that and staying pretty calm. But yeah, that day specifically, it was just the lead up into it was insane. Yeah. But yeah, that race went well. It was a very good tactical race. It wasn't like any shiny time. I think I ran like 9:34 or something and won the race.
Yeah.
But it was just one of the things where I had this feeling with like 800-ish to go. I was like, oh, I can win this. And I think that kind of moment in the race really kind of shifted the rest of my season, because as soon as I felt that in the race, I had a lot of confidence going into like other races and going into my training afterwards, where I was like, okay, if I can feel like this, and if I can close a steeple in like 68, 69, like I probably am in good shape to do more than that. So yeah, I mean, that was a really good setup for the rest of my year. Yeah.
In her first steeplechase as a professional runner, Madie had done it. She had won. So leading into her next big event, the LA Grand Prix, a month later, at the end of May, things were looking a little different.
I was definitely in a different headspace. I think at that time, I was operating more like myself. I was feeling really confident in training, feeling really confident going to the line during the race. And that meet was the LA Grand Prix last year in 2023. And yeah, I remember it not being anything crazy. Like, I don't really remember anything kind of standing out about the race until as we were running like okay-ish. And then I think I just really closed down the last lap pretty hard and ended up running the standard, like literally right under the standard by like 100th of a second. So, I mean, yeah, after that race, things really started to change for me, because then like, you know, brands were really interested and we started kind of working that a little bit more, and things kind of took off from there. Yeah, and then obviously I signed with Oiselle in June of last year, and it's been really interesting since, because I quit working with the football team and I kind of went full in on the being a pro runner thing. And I don't know, it's a very interesting life to live. And yeah, I mean, it is very insane to think of kind of where I was 3-4 years ago, and now I'm here trying to, you know, make a team and running the Olympic standard, and just these things that seem so out of my realm in the last few years.
Madie was in a groove. She had quickly established herself as a steeplechaser on the rise. She was racing well, and she'd made that all-important Olympic standard. Next up on the calendar was the biggest competition of the year, the U.S. National Championships, or USAs. And not only did athletes have a chance to win a national title here, this is also where the World Championship team selections took place. Just like with the Olympic team selections this year, where the top 3 finishers at USAs will make the Olympic team, last year, the top 3 finishers of each race at the national championships made the world's team, so there was a lot on the line. And going into the championships, all of Madie's momentum appeared to be heading in the right direction.
Unfortunately, like the day that really mattered, which was USA's, the final, I just didn't have it. I had there was a lot going on the week prior. You know, I had just signed to Oiselle, and so that was like a lot of exciting energy, but that's still energy being drained from you. And I also had a sinus infection. So yeah, it just like, I do believe everything happens for a reason. And so if last year clearly wasn't my year to make a team, then I can accept that. But yeah, at the time it was really kind of heartbreaking because I feel like the year was like building up to that point, how it does for everybody. But I was getting a lot of momentum every race, and I was running 10 seconds faster each race. And I was like, okay, what are we going to do now? So yeah, that was a tough pill to swallow. But yeah, the race didn't go well. And then 2 days later, I left for Europe, and my coach was like, you got to get on the plane and leave everything here and go there with a fresh head. So yeah, at the time I was like, oh my God, I have no time to even cry about it and process it. But I do think that it was for the best to kind of just, it forced me to like quickly move on and shift my focus to another race I had the next week.
Madie focused on switching gears quickly because within 48 hours of that disappointing performance at USA's, Madie was off to get her first taste of international racing. And she leaned on her well-developed skill of turning disappointment into a future asset.
Yeah, so I think Julie and my agent were both very good in like encouraging, you can't wallow in it. We have to move on. But I've always been somebody where I'm really motivated by proving people wrong. And so I think that I just used having like a bad race. I was like, okay, I just need to like capitalize on everything in Europe. I need to use every single race and every single experience as a chance kind of for redemption. And so shifting my mindset to that, I think helped. And yeah, I mean, I had a great summer post USA's. And I do think that kind of getting a taste of things last year and then now this year being like, okay, I got a taste, but I want to be obviously in that top 3 now. I think that that's also been a really good motivator.
With each experience, Madie has kept her eyes forward, focused on progressing to the next step. And now she wants to be in that top 3 at the upcoming U.S. Olympic trials because placing top 3 means making that team headed to Paris. Looking back on her pro career so far, it's clear that Madie was right to trust her intuition. Whatever the challenges that have been put in front of her, there is certainly more for Madie Boreman in this sport, and she is ready to go after it.
I think I was very lucky with my season last year. I had a lot of races that I performed well, and I do think that part of that was that I was putting a lot of pressure on myself that because I didn't have a contract, and so to be like, we really have to earn that, and like I said, kind of knock every race out of the park. And yeah, I think that, continuing, we had a great race plan and schedule for the year, and I was just running these races and I was doing really well, and I was continuing to build confidence kind of as I went along throughout the year. So I think that that really helped with the imposter syndrome. But I mean, it's hard, like, to come out of college and to know exactly how the NCAA system works, and then you're kind of just thrown into a whole new level and mix of things. And I felt like it really brought up some past issues that I had like dealt with, and kind of going into like, being a woman of color in distance running. I think it is a little isolating. And so dealing with that on top of not being signed, on top of being in a new environment around new people and just like trying to like prove yourself, I think was just a lot last year. But yeah, I mean, I got very lucky, and this year has been kind of a new wave of myself and a new wave of like a lot of things around me. So yeah, it's been a big shift this year compared to last year. I guess first of all, my training is very different. Last year, Julie and I were still getting to know each other, so we were kind of doing things similar to what I'd already been doing, but just tweaking things a little bit, adding in, more aerobic stuff. But this year I feel like my aerobic fitness is in like a whole new space. I'm doing things in my training that I didn't think were possible for me, so that's been really exciting. And then I also think that I'm just feeling more calm than I did last year. Like last year was a lot of chaos, And I actually tend to like thrive in chaos, but it's definitely been interesting to kind of see how my body's reacting to just being very like content and relaxed. So I think that will also work out nicely. But yeah, I mean, like the last 2 weekends I raced and I PR'd, and we kind of just trained through both of those, and to come out of 2 PRs and be like, I'm exhausted after like a 70-mile week, and then we did this and this. But I think that, I don't know, it makes me really excited about what's to come like later on this year, because I think that we're just sitting on a lot of like untapped fitness right now and kind of just waiting for the right moment to show that.
Madie Boreman is preparing to show what she's got, and she'll be aiming to do that at the 2024 U.S. Olympic Trials coming up very shortly. And that does bring us to the end of Madie Boreman's story on the podcast. A huge thank you to Madie for coming on the podcast and sharing her story. Madie, thank you so much, and I wish you an incredible Olympic trials and whatever comes next. I'm really looking forward to following Madie's racing, and I know you are too. So please look to the show notes, and I will provide a link to Madie's Instagram account. Also, look to the show notes for the article I mentioned up top, written by Cindy Kuzma for Runner's World, about the CU Boulder track and field team. As a reminder, the U.S. Olympic Trials will take place June 21st through the 30th, and the women's steeplechase final is scheduled for June 27th at 7:18 p.m. Pacific Time. And I also want to give a big thank you to Oiselle for their help with this episode and for putting me in touch with Madie Boreman. In particular, a big thank you to Justine Fedronic for her help. Thanks, Justine. Also, thank you so much for listening. I always appreciate you being here, and I do hope you join me again next Tuesday when I bring you the next inspirational story told by an exceptional woman runner. And that is going to do it for me. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I am the host and producer of Women's Running Stories. And until next time, I do wish you healthy, joyful, empowered strides forward. Women's Running. Women's Running Stories.
Hear Her Sports is a podcast for everyone who loves stories by and about women striving to improve and make a difference in their lives. I am your host, Elizabeth Emery, a former professional cyclist. In every episode, I introduce a female athlete or woman in the business of sport through a thoughtful conversation about who they are and the terrific work they're doing. My guests and I explore the glorious and frustrating issues in sports, history, equity, training, nutrition, and so much more. Join us for inspiration, for community, and for love of being a strong, athletic woman.